Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hulu Comedy Day, the third and final day of the USC Comedy Festival, Volume 5. I'm Alex Ago, Director of Programming at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. And before we get started, I'd like to thank our USC Comedy faculty and staff, as well as the USC Visions and Voices Arts and Humanities initiative that generously sponsored all 5 editions of this festival. I'd also really like to thank Hulu, and particularly Lauren Burnett, for being amazing festival partners and for bringing us a wide array of Hulu original comedy from Rami and Woke to Solar Opposites, Crossing Swords, Marvel's MODOK, and SHRILL. Our spotlight on Hulu's SHRILL features executive producer and star AIDY BRYANT, executive producer and showrunner RUSHFIELD, and executive producer and author LINDY and will be moderated by Pulitzer Prize-winning TV critic and LA Times cultural editor, McNamara. Before we start the panel, we're also going to look at the first episode from SHRILL Season 3, which is an exclusive sneak offered courtesy of Hulu in anticipation of SHRILL's Season 3 debut on May 7th. If you'd like to ask a question today, please just type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Enjoy the show, and please now welcome Professor Jack Epps Jr. from the John Wells Division of Writing for Screen and Television and the Jack Oakey Endowed Chair in Comedy.
Welcome to today's event, Spotlight on Hulu SHRILL. We're all very excited to see this and hear from the panel. I am Jack Epps Jr. from the John Wells Division of Writing. I'm also the holder of the Jack Oakey and Victoria Horn-Oakey Endowed Chair in Comedy. And I'm also co-director of USC Comedy, along with my colleagues Barnett Kelman and David Isaacs. USC Comedy is a program offering comedy classes in multi-divisions, divisions of writing, production, and media studies, where you can work and develop your comedic voice. So be sure to check out our courses for the fall semester on the USC Comedy website. And I also strongly recommend considering Foundations of Comedy CTWR 404 as a great place to start. And we also offer a comedy minor. And I want to take a moment to thank the School of Cinematic Arts Dean Elizabeth Daly for her continued support for USC Comedy. And a big special thanks to Alex Ago, Director of Programming and Special Projects at the School of Cinematic Arts, for producing this amazing weekend. So let's enjoy that sneak peek interview episode of SHRILL.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mary McNamara. I am unmuted. That's exciting. And I'm going to be your host, your moderator for today. So I want to welcome Lindy West, AIDY BRYANT, and Alexandra RUSHFIELD. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday morning. I hope everybody is doing well and surviving whatever part of the pandemic we are in right now. So I want to talk about the series as a whole because I love SHRILL, as Ali knows. But first we have to unpack that episode that we just saw. First of all, I really need to know that first scene was not drawn from actual real life, from anybody's actual experience as a human being on this planet.
Not me.
Okay.
No, not me either.
Because
it might have been one of the writers. I don't know.
that was absolutely hilarious. And just like you just really went for it there. And I also want to talk about the final scene, which is, I know that this is something that you've written about, Lindy, just sort of the horrible assumptions that doctors make for any woman who is more than 20 pounds overweight. And like, is that something like, have you had gastric bypass suggested to you just out of nowhere? That was just like the worst gynecologist ever invented.
I can't think of a day when I didn't have gastric bypass offered to me.
Pretty much me too. That was both of us.
Oh my God, that is unbelievable. It's anyway.
It's a real problem that puts fat people's lives in danger. You know, it's a major hurdle to getting adequate medical care, and I'm glad we got to put it in the series.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, you know, I certainly have had experiences like that where I've seen a doctor for less than 10 minutes. They have no sense of my history. You know, I'm there for a physical to get insured for a production or something. And yeah, they suggest something that's like so life altering in a really cavalier way.
That is terrible. I mean, I know from personal experience that you do get a lot of, well, if, you know, no matter what your problem is, it's like, well, maybe you should lose some weight. And it's like, well, you know, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to help my corn or, you know, my ingrown toenail or whatever it is that you've gone to the doctor, but thank you for sharing that. So anyway, so let's talk about the whole wonderful show and how it came to be. Let's tell the story of how, I mean, obviously this came about, Lindy, you're writing your book. How did Alexandra and AIDY, how did it all come together as a show? Because, you know, it's kind of like Sex in the City, but not, but like the idea of like having a series of essays become a television series is still fairly unique.
I think, well, Lindy wrote the book and then she connected with Warner Brothers and always thought of it as a TV show, right? Not a movie or anything. And then she needed someone just who had done TV before. So then we met and I got connected to it. And then at the same time, unbeknownst to us, as we were writing the list with AIDY as who we wanted, she was circling around asking about it as well.
You had already known, you knew that it was up for grabs.
I was just a huge fan of Lindy's and loved her book very, very much and still do. And well, really all her books, sorry, she's a big time author, but yeah, you know, I was a huge fan of her book and it was certainly the first time I had ever read anything and been like, that's exactly how it was for me. I mean, just like this gastric bypass thing, I was like, oh, yes, that's happened to me. And I had that too. And my life changed when I started thinking about things this way and totally connected to so many pieces of the story. And so I kind of like, truly, I think I like saw on like Twitter or something that like Elizabeth Banks had optioned the book. And I was like, what are they going to do with that? And I kind of just asked my agents to look into what they were going to do with it, because I really probably never in my life have like pursued anything quite like I did this book, because I just loved it and I loved what it had to say. And so then we met and we fell in love, and then we made this whole show for 3 seasons.
So can we talk about, I mean, Lindy, like the idea of having, I mean, obviously you are one of the more honest and out there writers, so it's not like, you know, you're afraid to have your experiences made public, but I mean, it is different to see it embodied in a television series. But let's talk a little bit about how you made that transition from, I mean, adapting a series of essays into a television series is very difficult because you have to create a narrative and you have to create ancillary characters and you have to create, you know, a workplace. How did you guys go about figuring that out? And how involved in that were you, Lindy, when you were like trying to craft it?
I was deeply involved. Really, the 3 of us figured it out together. And, you know, you're totally right. It's not really the TV version of the book. It's like there are details in the book that we used in the show, but it was a real collaboration. There's a lot of details from AIDY's life that we brought into the show and all of our writers. And we kind of, I think, you know, at the very beginning when it was just me shopping the option around, it was like, I want to, like the kernel from the book that I wanted to bring into the show was, you know, in the book, I write a lot about not having representation growing up in media, not seeing fat women or fat girls who looked like me and were happy and weren't just like a sort of, you know, like a sad sidekick or a weight loss narrative. And I write sort of criticism about that in the book. And then I wanted this show to be the antidote to that. You know, I wanted to make a story that I needed to see on TV when I was younger. So we kind of started from there, you know, what's missing, what's true to our lives that we don't see on TV. And we tried really hard. We worked really hard all the time to make sure that Annie always has dignity and is happy. She's not miserable. We see so many miserable fat people. It's kind of presented as the only option, the only way that you can exist is to be sort of apologetic for your body. And so we were kind of always working against what's already out there. using the book as a jumping off point. But yeah, it's definitely something that a narrative that the three of us created together.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's loosely based. I mean, you sort of made her a journalist. You made her working for a small alternative, so that made sense. One of the things that really impressed me about this series was you came out of the box with dealing with Annie's abortion and dealing with it in a way that you rarely see abortion dealt with on television. I mean, even now, it's still, we see it, we see it more often, but it's often like, the very special episode and the agony and the, whatever. But it was very matter of fact. I mean, it was like, obviously not an easy decision, never an easy situation for a woman to find herself in. But I mean, it was just dealt with the way people deal with it. And then you came back to it again in the second season, which I really loved, when you had the little bit about self-care and you had Annie talking about that was my how I showed self-care was I had an abortion because I couldn't have this baby at this time. Can you guys talk a little bit about, I mean, that it's still a pretty standout kind of thing to do. Were you nervous? Did you get any pushback? Did you, what was the reaction to that storyline?
I always, when we filmed it or were writing it, wanted it to be more of a comedy abortion scene than it was. And I constantly was told by AIDY and LINDY, like, no, we're not doing jokes in the scene. Mm-hmm. So that's what didn't happen.
And are you still angry about that?
Yeah, kind of am. I just still remember I was like, wanted her to ask the person who was doing the procedure, like, is this like killing a fly or like removing a mole? And they were both like, absolutely not. Yes, I am still angry about it.
And that's why we're here, to process it.
Yeah. Yes, okay. So how do you feel about that, AIDY?
No, I mean, I think LINDY writes in the book very beautifully about her own abortion and has done a lot of incredible activism in that space to destigmatize, because I can promise you, anyone watching, someone you know and love, or maybe yourself, has had an abortion. And I think that's part of what we wanted to put, onto screen, was like, there's a normality to it. There's it happens all the time. And a lot of people feel really great about their decision to make it. They know that that's the right decision they made. It's a medical procedure, just like when you get your teeth cleaned on some level, there are like many things that we do to take care of our bodies. So that was kind of our point of view that we wanted to bring to it. And I think, especially I felt really grateful for the scene where Annie's talking with Fran about like kind of weighing whether to do this and using it as a way to sort of give herself more value, because she felt so worthless that maybe having a baby or forcing someone into a relationship because they would have this baby would give her more value. And I think it's like a big turning point in the story where she realizes like that is, I'm valuing myself so little that I have to like find a way to look at myself differently and not use this small, potential person that I would make to give myself value. I don't know, LINDY, you should really speak on this.
Oh, that's me. No, that's totally, I agree. And I think the abortion, I mean, obviously like talking about abortion is really important to me. But it also worked really beautifully with the bigger narrative of the show, which is this young woman deciding that she's tired of sort of accepting this secondary place in the world and being told that she's less important and less valuable and less talented and than other people because of her body. And this whole the larger narrative is about her making this choice to become the driver of her own life instead of a passenger, and sort of demanding the kind of autonomy and the kind of like big brilliant life that everyone deserves. And choosing to have an abortion really mirrors that choice in a really beautiful way. It's literally looking at your future and looking at what you want and choosing autonomy and choosing yourself and choosing to to be in control of your own reproduction and when and if you have a child. That's such a huge part of freedom, and having Annie make that choice in the pilot really kicks off the whole arc of the series. And I'm really, really proud of that episode. One of the things I'm the most proud of.
And when we pitched it, we had like the pilot thought out with that abortion in it, and nobody ever pushed back on it.
Really?
Like, it was never like, well, maybe that's not, a good idea to put in the show or the pilot. It was never questioned that was a good idea.
Well, it certainly sets the tone for the rest of the show, which is that you're not going to pull any punches, and you're not afraid to do anything. But going back to what you were saying, Lindy, about Annie's journey, I think that was really in the second season where she recognizes that was an act of self-care. I think that really hit me. And I just wondered because you have a lot of different threads going in this, did you, was that something that you thought about in the first season that you wanted to reference in the second season, or was that just something that came up because you were doing that wonderful episode on, what was it called? I keep wanting to say Wham.
Waham, women are having a moment.
Yeah, that was to sort of juxtapose those two things. Was that something that you had in mind?
Yeah, I would say you're always tracking a lot of things in any television show. There's a lot of threads, like, her Annie and her family, Annie and her work, Annie and relationships. And I think one of the things we always looked at every season, every episode, was how are we looking at Annie and her relationship to her body and her self-worth. And, ultimately, I think that's what the show is about. And so, the abortion was a big part of her finding that spark within herself. And so I think it only makes sense that when she's looking at this insane women's conference that's all about empowerment, but it feels kind of hollow, that she would try to look really deeply within herself and say, like, where did I find any kind of inner strength? Well, I found it in that moment where I advocated for myself. And I think when you're surrounded by like serums and leg makeup and crystals and dildos all saying like, this is how women be strong, y'all, it's like it becomes really clear like what's real and what is insane and nothing to grab onto. So yeah.
And Lindy wrote an article about the Goop, was it the Goop seminar? And so then that like turned into a conversation about, that article turned into a conversation about like doing a episode about that kind of seminar, and then how to connect what the character's journey and backstory was to what happened to her there.
In the first season, another episode that got a lot of attention was the I don't know what it was called, the pool party, the pool party, where it was all larger size women and just having a great time. And it's a really big moment for Annie's character in terms of like self-love, but it was also, everybody wrote about it, and it was just like, again, something that we have ever seen on television before. Can you talk a little bit about like that, about the thoughts that went into, and it was a long episode. It wasn't longer than any of the episodes, but we spent a lot of time at the pool party because usually the scenes in SHRILL, like you move along at a pretty good pace, but that was a big set piece. Can you talk a little bit about that and about, doing it and, the reaction to it that you guys got?
I think similar to the gastric bypass and a few other pieces of the show, it's something that Lindy and I had sort of shared experiences in that area where we both spent probably most of our childhood, I would say, feeling really bad about being fat and, into our early 20s. And I know for me, like I went to college in Chicago and I was suddenly surrounded by a lot of like fat women who were cool and dressed cool and were into like music and went to concerts. And I saw Beth Ditto of The Gossip perform, and I was like, who is that? What is that? I want to be like that big, fat, powerful woman. And we also talked a lot about looking at images of fat women on the internet, on Tumblr and blogs back in the day, that really changed our perception of what it was to be fat and how it was to live your life. And we wanted to try and, put together like a physical embodiment of that. And, these sort of big fat babe pool parties are such a thing in the plus size community. And I think that felt like a perfect, like sort of physical illustration of those feelings that Lindy and I and some of our other writers had experienced, of seeing fat women unapologetically living their lives, unashamed, having fun. What a liberating, thrilling thing it is to see. And also how devastating it is to know that you've spent maybe 20, 25, 30 years of your life adjusting your sweater or worrying about how you're being perceived. And that at a certain point, you can just stop caring about that stuff and live freely. And so that was really like where the seed of that episode came from.
Yeah. And it was really beautiful to, we're doing kind of three things simultaneously, where we're giving that moment to the character where she has this realization of like, oh my God, it's okay to have a body and wear a swimsuit. And then we're also giving that moment to the audience watching it who's maybe never seen this before. And then also the crew was so like profoundly affected by that shit. And I just had people coming up to me, get like 45-year-old dudes who were just like, wow, this was really beautiful to just be here and feel the joy of all these people. I don't know, like it was just like really moving.
The little girl who played Annie her mother was talking about how all her brothers and sisters are thin, and that she got to celebrate herself for her, her body just by being chosen to be in this show, which turned into like a 2 a.m, me and Lindy and one of our crew people, Ime, all hugging each other and crying.
Yeah, it was also like, us writing this pool party and producing this episode, we really did throw a big fat women's cool pool party, and there was food and all our amazing background were like, hanging out together. And it was kind of the opposite of COVID times. It was just like people everywhere hanging out and having fun. And, particularly shooting that dancing scene where everyone was just letting it loose. I mean, we shot that for hours and the energy never dipped, it only intensified. And it was really, I mean, Lindy's right. There were many crew members on the set who were, I think not from the plus size world, who were so moved by that they were in tears at the monitor. And it was a really special thing. And it meant a lot that it translated to so many people who watched it, because we felt it so strongly on the day.
And we were lucky to get a director that was like so into it and so visual and like just cared about every piece of it, even though that wasn't his background.
Yeah, worth noting that Shaka King, who directed that episode, also directed Judas and the Black Messiah, which is now Oscar nominated, and he's nominated for an Oscar. So it's like the coolest, but he had a really strong vision of what that episode should feel like, of them stepping into this whole other world. And he made some really huge camera movements, all those underwater shots where she's swimming, that I think you really feel what a relief it is.
How long does a scene like that take to shoot? Was it more than one day, or were you able to do it in a day?
It was 2 days. Yeah. And, I would say the underwater stuff took probably half of one day, and then everything else. We even had a few scenes that we ended up having to trim or cut just because it was such a huge undertaking. And it was, a lot of extras, a lot of people to wrangle, but we did it.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was, it made me, I wanted to go. And it certainly, I'm sure that the casting call was fun. I'm sure like getting all those extras, they all looked like they were having a blast.
I hadn't really articulated this before just now, but like several of the women who were extras in that shoot were literally the women that I used to see on Tumblr doing like fat modeling for themselves. You know what I mean? Like it was literally the same people that helped me on my journey. And then
you were in it.
And I was in it, and I had a very beautiful cameo, and I did very good.
That must have been fun. Was that fun?
Was it fun?
Yeah.
I found it very stressful. It was just walk across and then go into a tent. And I was like, it was
a lot that day about how you had to go get your hair and makeup done so you couldn't talk to me.
That is not true, but maybe it's true. I don't know. It's
how many takes? Did you do it at take?
I had one because it was like 80 jumped in the pool. It was like a one-shot thing or something. I don't know. I think we just did it once, which was so scary.
But we got it.
Pro.
Did they give you a movement coordinator to like tell you how to walk across?
I don't even remember. I do remember that I was wearing like heels, like that were like this tall. I don't know. It was
now I'm gonna have to go back and watch it and see, because I don't think I was aware that you made a cameo. I'm sorry. You were just one of the many beautiful women walking around.
Right before I jump in the pool, look for Lindy.
The pool. Yeah, I always wonder about the pool scenes because it's like it's like, because you're wet, you know. I mean, it's like, so you got to get everything done when you're dry before you get wet, right? I mean, that's got to be the way they organize it. So in the third, or in the second season, and then we're going to talk about the third season, but in the second season, you know, we sort of branch out, we see more character, you know, we see like a storyline with Fran, we see Annie also. I mean, maybe I'm reading into this, but it's sort of like she's learning that she's not the only one with problems, which is always, you know, good, and that everybody has their own separate issues with the world. So how was, you know, what was that sort of how you envisioned it? Did you map out like a, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 seasons? I know the third season is the final season. Is that my understanding? Was that sort of like, did you map it out that way when you were originally thinking of her journey?
No, we didn't. I mean, I think we always knew we didn't want to do like 7, 8, 10 seasons or something like that. I think we were thinking probably like 4, you know, and we didn't totally know that it would be the final season until a little bit later. So, you know, there was some adjusting. No, all good. We're all right. So we were sort of adjusting as we went, but we're really, really happy with where it lands. And I think it's a really kind of nice place for this story about self-worth to land, which is, you know, to me, ultimately, it's like, it's never over. There's never like a golden prize or a finish line. It's like every day there will be a new thing that arrives and all you can change is how you deal with it. But, you know, I think as far as like the Fran element, I think the first season, because we only had 6 episodes, which was mostly just because of time constraints, it became like a really, an Annie story only, mostly, you know, and it was like kind of all about following her from like A to B of this little journey into like finding some control in her life and taking control of her own life. And then I think in the second season, we finally had a little bit more space to really give Fran the storyline she deserved. And yeah, I think you're exactly right, which is like showing kind of Annie that she's been so far in her own issues that she couldn't always see other people. And I think she thinks of herself as this kind of like, you know, put upon person, but it's like everyone is. And how can you be a support to your friend? And you know, there's some of that gets a little messier in season 3 in a really fun way, I think too.
Well, one of the things I really like about her character is that she can be a jerk sometimes. I mean, like we love her and you love her throughout because she is lovable, but there's also times when, you know, she is genuinely being, you know, too self-involved or just like being kind of mean or like, you know, I even felt bad for, you know, Ryan. It's like he seemed to be growing and then, but I mean, I love the whole thing of like, just tell me what to do. And you're just like, well, not you, but Annie's like, I don't want to have to tell you what to do. that really resonated. So in terms of Allie, if you want to talk a little bit about like just sort of building out the characters and how you sort of keep it on Annie, because it is still very much Annie's show. How do you like sort of figure the balance of, you know, who the story, how far the storylines wander from her journey?
I mean, we would start each season with what AIDY was talking about, the different categories of like Annie and friends, Annie and love, Annie and work, Annie and family. And then, but once we got into season 2 and saw like how good Lolly was, and then Fran became her own category. And I think, yeah, and then it remained in season 3, it was like not just Fran, and then it became Fran and work, Fran and relationship. So then I don't know, it sort of just it was like we figured out what their arcs of their lives were, and then how each episode would like break down in terms of that. But yeah, the first season, I feel like AIDY was, except for like the flashback, was in like every single scene. And then the second and third season became more about Fran's life as well. And that was partially just because, I mean, she just was so good. And also the audience reacted so well to her. And also her story was so interesting. And, but yeah, it wasn't so much, it was like starting with Annie and then seeing how other people's stories grew around that. It wasn't like a huge decision, just as much as like, what is their journey going to be and how much space will that take up?
And then in the second season, I mean, the first season stayed, I mean, again, it's not like, you know, you're adapting Game of Thrones or something, but it like stayed, there were moments that were lifted from Lindy, from some of your essays. I mean, the storyline about the troll, the storyline about your dad or her dad. I mean, but then you move away from your source material a little bit in the second season. So what was that like? I mean, how did you, or at that point, did you feel like between the three of you, you had a vision of what the journey was going to be?
Just, I feel like just like the character had a life of her own, separate from any of us or our stories, and just became like the brainchild of like the whole writer's room. So then we started using just stories from Lindy's life, AIDY's life, everyone in the room's life, and going from there. And it just became about the fictional world based on the real world more than one person's journey specifically. But there was, you know, like the Waham and the Goop article and just different, you know, and the gastric bypass, like there's things that are, you know, from Lindy's specific life that were in it throughout as well.
Does the show, Lindy, do you think about the show when you're also doing your other work, or how do you compartmentalize those two things since they are like sort of entwined?
You mean like when I'm writing other books?
When you're writing other pieces, other books, are you thinking about like, is there a little shrill thing in the back going, how will this work?
No, because I've only written that one memoir. I kind of moved into writing more about politics, which we don't really address in the show, except for in the ways that politics affect our personal lives. No, I mean, I what Allie said, you know, these characters sort of became alive, and my book was there as sometimes it was like a helpful resource if we, you know, sometimes it generated an idea, but you know, once the train is off and running, it's like we're all following it and seeing where it goes. There was no need to like stick closely to the book. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I really just, especially post season 1, thought of myself as part of this team and not as like the you know, the source material. It was really a true collaboration that we were all working on together, which was really fun. I mean, writing books and articles is so solitary, and I've just for years been working at home all by myself on my couch. Like, I don't even have an office, and to get to like suddenly be a part of this project with hundreds and hundreds of brilliant people was great. Yeah, I mean, not difficult to compartmentalize, but you know, a really, I don't know, I would say kind of getting to do both is a really nice balance. It was like, it was fun to come off the project and be like, okay, now I get to make something all by myself that is a book and nobody else gets to make any choices. And then I would get to go back to the show and be like, great, now I get to sit down with all my favorite people and write jokes and figure out what we're going to make. It's a great life, and I recommend it.
Well, I mean, but it's interesting because you are in many ways a cultural critic, but now you are part of the culture. And I mean, obviously your books made you part of the culture, but that's separate. But when you make a television show, now you're in it. Now you can, yeah.
Yeah, very scary because I was very mean as a critic. Very needlessly cruel, because I started when I was very young and I didn't know that you should be nice to people. And I'm grateful that people have been kind. Or maybe, I mean, also that we did a good job. But I mean, it was a scary transition. Like, you know, okay, I talked a big game about what's good and what's not. So let's see how the thing is that I make.
Right.
I'm really proud of it.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about the third season. I mean, one thing that, as you just mentioned, you don't get into politics. It's also not set in a particular time. So I'm assuming you're not going to deal with the pandemic in season 3 the way many series are doing. But were you impacted by the pandemic? Where were you when the lights went out? I mean, were you done?
We were just about to start writing it.
Oh, season
3. We thought we would all be together in the writer's room in New York as we had done the year before. And then it became a Zoom room.
Okay. So, and then you were able to obviously film it when it looked like the fall from that.
Yeah, I mean,
later.
It's weird. I would say like the length of the pandemic is how much time it took to make season 3, basically, because we started kind of in the summer writing, and then we kept thinking like we'll shoot in the summer, and then it kept being like, no, life is not going back to normal, and so ultimately it got pushed to the fall. And so then we shot kind of like October, November, December, and then we've basically been editing until about last week, so now we're done. Yeah.
So where do you shoot?
In Portland.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so
Yeah.
I love it. It's a nice like piece of Lindy's kind of origin, the Pacific Northwest. And we use the same crew as Portlandia because it's also a Broadway video production. So it was this kind of amazing group of people who had been working together for 8 years on Portlandia that we got to sort of take over when Portlandia ended.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, that scene in the park was really beautiful. I was like, I need to go somewhere where there's foliage at some point. So can we talk a little bit about the final season? I mean, we sort of set, what Annie's journey is through this arc. I mean, obviously she's dating a bunch of people and learning that sex is weird no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, I think this season, it's a lot, it's almost taking all the pieces of the first and the second season and kind of putting them in motion. So it's like, she finally is like feeling a little more confident. She is speaking up for herself. She's not putting up with stuff, with Ryan anymore. And now it's time to sort of like take what she learned and put it out on the open road. And, as you can imagine, that's much easier said than done. And I think it's a little bit of what we were talking about earlier about, kind of her feeling like I'm taking care of myself and I'm not just going to people please. I'm going to get out there and, take care of me. And I think she has a way of overcorrecting, and sometimes getting getting her ass handed to her, I guess would be the technical term this season. So yeah, she really has to kind of, I think it's a good, she goes very high to the sun and then kind of goes back down to hell and then lands somewhere very healthfully in the middle, I would say.
Yeah, I really love that about her. It's like, you can always tell when somebody's had just a little too much therapy when they start being rude to waiters. And it's like, that's not self-empowerment. But
People say that is, I've never heard that.
huh?
Do people say that's self-empowerment?
Well, no, I say
myself.
that to my friends who are like trying to seize control of their lives by being rude to people who it's just like, save that for,
Yeah.
your mother or whatever. The service personnel do not need to deal with that. Let me ask you real quick, AIDY, what's it been like? I mean, as somebody, you as a comic, as a member of SNL, to attach yourself to an evolving character like this, that you are also so involved in, but that just is growing and moving, and that it's not, you're not just, because on Saturday Night Live, you're in and out of different characters and having to like think on your feet and all this stuff. How has that been?
Oh, it's been probably the greatest experience of my life in many ways, creatively. I would say like SNL is sort of like this mini TV machine, and you write a piece that is 4 minutes long, that's a sketch that has its own little tiny arc, and you make all these decisions to get it made by Saturday. It's much like making a television show, but like in a week. And so to get to work with this team and our production designers and costume designers, which are such a part of telling the story, to get to do that on every single level, including on camera, for now 3 years, 4 really, if you count development and everything. It's such a satisfying, so deeply satisfying creatively to get to, be a part of the writing. And then, even on set, there are times where there's questions from the director or all those things. And it's like, I know the answer always, because I was there when we thought of the idea and I know what we were going for. And, it's been just like such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And even including like casting, so many of the people that are on this show, I'm so proud of, because they're brilliant, brilliant performers who I knew as stand-up comics, who I think have gotten to really show how much more they could do, and so that's been like a really rewarding part of it for me. And just to also, to push myself as an actor as well as a writer, that's been really, really thrilling. And Allie and Lindy have been such like an integral part of that. So it's the very best.
That's great. I'm realizing that questions from the audience are stacking up. So I'm going to ask a few of those, because I don't, obviously I could ask you like a million questions all day, but okay. So Phoebe asks, I think this is to you, AIDY, as a leading woman in comedy, did you feel like you had a responsibility in SHRILL to improve representation and subvert tropes?
I mean, yes, no, all of things at once. I think, this is something Lindy and I talked about a lot, and especially even as we were pitching the show, is like, we really wanted to have a fat character with a full life who had complete dignity. And I think that's something we did, that I feel really proud of, and that she was a sexual person and not just like this infantilized, goofy, cutie dork, or like, I think there's a way that people are comfortable seeing fat women. And I really feel like we kind of like pushed that boundary a little bit. And, I think that's a little piece that I felt, oh, hello. that I felt comfortable doing at this point, because I had done like, many years on SNL and other things that I was like ready to take that on. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I addressed that to AIDY, but actually it could go to either one of you guys. I mean, did you, Lindy or Allie, were there, when you were starting this, were there certain tropes or certain stereotypes that you like had on your list of we're gonna deal with these, we're gonna take these on in the show?
I don't know. I really liked having an abortion in the pilot.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's
one thing I love that we did too, that we were kind of, I would say maybe this was one area where we were like not pushed, but definitely questioned on, was there were some questions about like, well, should we see how Annie transforms like physically, as far as like, should she dress kind of dumpy and like in a heavy cardigan that like hides her body, so that then we slowly start to see her like dress cooler or something. And I think we felt pretty adamant that there was no external transformation. No external transformation. That was like kind of what we kept saying over and over again. And I feel like that was maybe one piece that we fought pretty hard for, that ultimately I think we were like, really proud of.
Another choice that we made that kind of surprised me, that I didn't really expect to be the choice. And then as we were making it,
Uh-oh, did we lose her?
Freeze? Oh, okay. I thought it was me.
No, I think
Froze?
she's really frozen.
Come back, Lindy. Okay.
Wow, what a cliffhanger too. I want to know what she's
know.
going to say.
The one thing, the secret
one-
to Shrill. Okay. All right. Well, maybe we'll move on while she reconnects, because it looks like she's going to have to log out and log back in. So Marco asks, are there any circumstances, characters, subject matter that you plan on adding to the show, which I assume that is going to come up in season 3? Were there any, specific things that you wanted to address in season 3?
I mean, I think the piece about the doctor's office was something that we had talked about even in the first season, but never quite found a place for. And that was something we were pretty excited to address. And it kind of, in later episodes becomes a piece of something a little bit bigger for her. Yeah, that was definitely one.
We always wanted to do an episode that had to do with her health in some way.
Mm-hmm.
There was like different ways we thought of doing it, and this is the way it ended up being.
Yeah.
I love the earbuds. I like the AirPods have given comedy like a whole new thing where you can have this screaming and then everybody's like, I can't hear you. That was very fun.
What was she gonna say?
Yeah, Lindy, what was the one thing we were dying to know?
It's not even good.
No.
It broke the internet.
Sorry, something happened to my Wi-Fi. That I really liked how season 3 is like, okay, Annie plunges into dating, and then we didn't like brutalize her. Like, there's a lot of awkwardness, and there, it doesn't go great, but it's not just like, and this is not necessarily true to life, because I do feel as though I was brutalized by dating. That it was just like a series of men being like, ew. But we really like let her kind of, that's not everyone's experience. And like she goes out and has like a complex, sometimes distressing, sometimes really fun time, which just has so much more depth to it than just, what you would expect, which is like, that lady is disappointing to horrible men. You know what I mean? Which is like, I don't know, kind of expected. And I think what actually happens is more interesting.
I agree. It gets very juicy and like more emotionally complex, I think, in an interesting way.
As we go on.
Yeah.
Away from the pearl-sized cum droplet. So that's
we leave that pearl behind.
That's good.
Way more normal cum later.
Ropes. I was like, okay. It's like that episode of television is just like, here's how television has changed in the last 20 years. Just watch this right here. Okay. So Jack asks, how much did you have Patty Harrison in mind when writing that character? It seems like you've captured her comedic voice so well.
Yeah, we wholly we had her in mind. And, actually I would say a lot of our cast, we, wrote sort of towards them or adjusted their character based on who they are as comedians. But yeah, Patty is brilliant. And I mean, I'm so thrilled. She's like now starring in all kinds of stuff. And, she's having a huge moment, and it's really thrilling because she's so talented and so funny. And, I would say a lot of our scenes that are comedy heavy, especially the stuff in The Thorn, we always write a script. We always shoot that script, but then we always encourage them to improvise. And so, you know, I mean, it's hard to like quantify what is improv and what is written, or pieces of it are written, but you know, she's certainly one of those people who we always flag as like, let Patty improvise, because you never know what you're going to get.
And the part was, there wasn't that part. It was like written for her.
Yeah.
Okay, Melanie asks, I remember reading that for season 1, a lot of Annie's costumes had to be made from scratch as plus size fashion is limited. Oh wait, no, it's just moved. Okay. Have you seen any changes, and do you think Shrill is helping to change how the industry treats fat characters? Was that true? Did you have to make the costumes more than normal you have to make?
Yes, it is true.
They are cute. The dresses are all super cute.
Yeah, I mean, we have a really wonderful costume designer, Amanda Needham, and I think she really got it when we sat down and talked with her about how we didn't want an external transformation. We wanted someone with style who had a point of view. She's in this like sort of artsy community. And, you know, I think it was something that we really weighed was, one, do we give this character what she could actually afford, what she could find in the market, or do we make a fat leading lady who looks like any other goddamn leading lady on television, you know, which is like dressed to the nines. And so we opted for the second version. And often that did mean making clothes from scratch, because I think though there are many, many more options than when I was like younger in my early 20s or teens. And it was like, you go to Old Navy or there's nothing else, you know. I think for this, we ended up making a lot of the clothes partially because it is hard. Though there may be more plus size clothes now, they're not always like a certain kind of style, if that makes sense. Or they are, we talk about this in one of the episodes, I think the pool party episodes, sometimes they're overly cutesy, or they're covered in pencils or little like cupcakes. And how do you make kind of like a cool character who has like this Portland point of view? That stuff doesn't always exist in plus size. So I do think the options are better, but I'll tell you, like, as I am in Saturday Night Live or other shows, almost all my clothes have to be altered or changed. They buy 2 small dresses and combine them to make one big dress for my ass. Like, you know, those kinds of things are this insane luxury that I'm being given that I didn't have for my entire life, that, you know, it's not fair. It's just actually not fair. And it's a huge market. Most women do look like me or like Lindy in America, as far as our size. And so it's disheartening for sure, but I do think it's getting better. I think places are starting to realize that we want to dress cool too. Lindy, what do you think?
Are they? I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, it's like you're so conditioned by scarcity to be grateful for any blouse. And like
Clothes.
Thank you. But like, thank you. But and it's way a billion times better than when I was in high school, when there was like one store. But the fact is that like women who are a size 0 to 12 have thousands of stores that they can shop at. And there is this, if you want to actually deeply express yourself through fashion, you have such a narrow range of options that it's really, I mean, it's really challenging. It's not, you know, it's a lot better, but please sell me clothes. I want to buy them.
We're begging you.
Listen, I'm older than any of you, I think. And I remember when the only clothes you could get that were plus size clothes were from the Sears catalog, and they were called chubby. You had to the chubby clothes. Like, and if you went into the store, you had to ask, do these come in chubby sizes? So it's like Old Navy was a huge, like, yes, at least they're just sizes.
we blessed Old Navy.
No, I'm not, and I hear you. It's like the bar should not be that low that you should be happy that one store has them. Okay, so Summer asks, I love the joy in her face. I assume she's talking about Annie. Have any of you experienced that feeling? That, I mean, she is a very joyful character. How did you like just sort of Is that you, AIDY? Is that like something you guys all talked about?
I unfortunately, and this has been maybe the plague of my life, like I have like a resting, smiling face. And it is why people stop me on the street and they're like, can you give me directions, or will you watch my bag, or will you carry this? And I end up saying, yes, of course. So it's something I'm working on, honestly, is to be more neutral.
That's hilarious. The opposite of the resting bitch face.
Yes, it's a plague as well. So,
well, it works.
I don't know that it was like an active decision. I don't know. It just depends, I think.
Joy is a wonderful thing to be able to show. Okay, Claudia, wait. There is someone here who knows you.
Oh.
Hi, AIDY. It's Sarah Scialli, Scialli, from way back in your teen improv troupe and middle school days in Phoenix. I'd love to know what lessons from your improv training you incorporate into producing the show.
Oh,
sorry.
God. No. Well, hello,
the middle school,
Sarah. Gosh, a lot. I mean, like I said, we improvise on set all the time. I also think for me, it's almost how I write. Like when, we break an episode and then I sit down to actually sit down and type it. Like I kind of think like I'm improvising a scene, but from two people's point of view and putting it on paper, listening and reacting, all those like basic tenets of improv. And then, I also would say like on set, if we're shooting a scene and it's not working and it feels kind of clunky or kind of weird, like I think one of the main ways we've tried to get through that is to loosen it up, encourage people to improvise. Or actually there's a scene in the first season where I'm like sitting in a kind of vintage parking lot with Fran, and that was a more serious scene, but the director said like, AIDY, why don't you do a whole take where you don't say any of the words in the script? And that was actually most of the take that we ended up using. And I think there's another one this season, in the newer season, where we did that. So it's something I use all the time. And for me, it's like probably my guiding light of writing, honestly.
Okay, Claudia says, I identify so much with this show and I appreciate how Annie is not constantly being told to love herself, or she doesn't just focus on corny exercises to love herself. Was that intentional? What do you do to prevent cheesy moments like this from happening in the show, while also showing Annie tackling moments where she has to keep her self-worth in check? But yeah, the love, there's no like, you don't have her reading, a self-help book on how to love yourself. Was that, did you guys talk about that? Was that something, because there are, a lot of, love your body, live in your body. She could have been doing that. Was that something?
Seemed like sort of canned, and that the real way to do it is to tell a story of a person's life and then just see the different directions they go in. Part of what we always wanted to do in the different areas of her life was like never have them all good at the same time. Like my work and my love life and my friendships are all going well. So I don't know. I think the choice to not do that is that maybe we are doing that, but it's told as a story. So it doesn't seem like that as much.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that's how we avoided the show feeling messagey in every area, is to always be focused on story. Because we do have some big messages in there, but they're hidden, I think, in an artful way, because we always really prioritized making sure we were telling a good story and giving these characters a real life.
And I don't think people would hear it if it was just so direct,
Mm-hmm. No, showing is always better than telling, but it is something that we are told, love yourself. And you're like, dude, if I could do that, like, I wouldn't be buying this book, but whatever. Pauline wants to know, how do you handle or feel nervous about depicting near real life things and people like Goop or Annie's boss? I mean, and John Cameron Mitchell, what is that? I need to add that. What's it like working with him? Because he is a brilliant lunatic. So how do you deal with that? I mean, how close will you get to real life?
I mean, for it immediately became very terrifying as soon as we started writing season 1. I was like, oh, everyone's gonna think this is, you know, word for word taken from my life. This is my real boyfriend. This is my real mom. My actual real mom is going to kill me. You know, it was like terrifying. And a lot of people assumed that John Cameron Mitchell's character was literally my old boss, Dan Savage. And, you know, I just basically like it's not, because again, as I've said a bunch of times today, it's like, this is a huge collaboration and you're working with a bunch of people and bringing everyone's ideas in. And I don't know,
it's like, he was like all of our mentor bosses, and Ryan was all of our shitty boyfriends, you know?
Yeah.
That's how it ended up being.
Yeah. I mean, the vulnerability it would take to, I guess, make a reenactment of your actual life in every exact detail would be superhuman, and also probably boring. You know, what we were making a fictional show to entertain people, and I'm grateful for that, because it's scary.
I know, I do feel guilt about when Lindy would say something about her life and I was like, we have to use that, and she's like, I don't want to. I was like, it's too late, you said it, we all love it and we're using it.
Yeah, you learn really fast, like, don't say it in the writer's room show, because people will grab it and not let it go, even if it's humiliating, especially if it's humiliating.
Was there a lot of like, not confessional, but a lot of like sort of, well, this happened and that happened, and everybody telling their like favorite worst story? Was that like?
Yeah, what a writer's room is kind of.
Did you have to bring a therapist in?
We were each other's therapists, I think. Yeah, it's honestly, that's mostly what our writer's room was just people being like, I mean, actually, that in the first episode, one of our writers really did have a guy like bite a string off of her shorts or something, and she was like, I still think about it to this day. You know, so
I wonder if that guy will see the episode and go, oh, is that weird? Okay, so I think I'm going to ask one last question. I don't know if somebody's going to come in and tell me, like, give me the hook or whatever. First, Melanie wants to know, for people who are desperately waiting for season 3 of Shrill and need some good fat representation to fill the gaping hole in their hearts, do you have any recommendation of media that gets it right? Do you have any other shows? When does Shrill? I'm sorry, I should know this, and I don't. When does the 3rd season premiere on Hulu?
Oh, the season 3 comes out on May 7th, which is very soon now, so you don't have too long to wait.
It's her birthday.
It is my birthday. That was a horrifying thing when I found out the show was coming out that day. But too much attention to me.
And now we all know, so we'll tweet about it a lot.
Sorry.
So are there other shows that you know, or media? Movies?
I only watch like Beat Bobby Flay.
I actually have to say, this is a weird response to this question, but The Real Housewives of Atlanta is a very good depiction of people's bodies that aren't like size 0, and they're always eating and loving it and making everything about bigger bodies and food seem really appealing.
This is not a super recent show, but there's a TV show called My Mad Fat Diary that I really loved. It's a little maybe less happy of a depiction of a fat woman's life, but I think it's incredibly moving and really earnest. So I would recommend that. I'm on SNL. I do my damn best there. You can see me there if you like that.
What are you guys, is there anything in the pipeline for you guys that we should keep our eye out for? Obviously SNL, but a new book, a new series that you want to mention before we go?
I'm doing a stop motion animation show about women in the workplace at Christmas in the Christmas industry.
Cool. Stop motion, like Frosty the Snowman, like that.
Yeah, like that sort of nostalgia style.
Cool. We'll look for that. Lindy, you got anything else?
I wrote a book that came out in the last fall called Shit Actually, which is a book of movie reviews, and it's really funny. And I think my previous book before that is coming out in paperback soon. It's called The Witches Are Coming. And I also wrote an episode of a show called Notes on Love, which is a Shonda Rhimes show on Netflix that I also think is really funny. And I don't even know when it's coming out, but I wrote it, and someday you can watch it.
All right then. AIDY?
Wow, not me. I'm going to retire after this. No, I have a couple little things in the pipeline that I don't think legally I can say a word about. So look out.
Crimes.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Alex, are you closing out the show, or am I closing out the show?
I'm absolutely happy to close it out. This was awesome. Thank you all so much. I cannot wait for the third season to premiere, and please come back with your next projects. I really can't wait to see what you guys do next. And especially AIDY, to see you continue doing Ted Cruz on SNL.
Oh,
love it. Love it.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Looking forward to season 3. Bye.
Bye.